In yesterday's video, I discussed the hypothetical Zion Williamson trade to the Miami Heat. Some people were in favor of it, others thought it was too big a risk, which of course I understand because that was kind of the whole point of the video. I mean, stop me if you've heard this one before, but the Miami Heat lack assets, at least relative to other teams. So if they try to go whale hunting this offseason, like they have in the past, but they weren't in the game for anybody, the bad news is I still don't think they're in the game for anybody and probably won't ever be in the game for a true superstar, perfect prospect because we won't have the assets, at least not for quite a long time until we can recoup some more first-round picks and ideally stop wasting them on guys like Terry Rozier. So that means that if the Heat do want to go whale hunting, they're going to have to settle for a guy who has some sort of obvious flaw, whether that's a current Kevin Durant, who of course his biggest flaw is his age, or maybe it's Zion Williamson, who makes a ton of money, has major availability concerns, and some pretty serious legal allegations that are currently under investigation. So I understand that may be too much baggage for a lot of Heat fans, and they might want nothing to do with him, and I get that. The good news is, though, he isn't the only player from New Orleans that I think could be a good fit on the Miami Heat. They really have a lot of great role players that I think could benefit us. So in today's video, I want to talk about some hypothetical trades that the two teams can work out for some other prospects outside of Zion Williamson. Also, I forgot to ask you if you could please subscribe because I spent a lot of time putting this video together and your likes and subscriptions are greatly appreciated because it's currently past 1:30 in the morning and I'm still editing so I can get this video out tomorrow. So I do appreciate your support. Let's get back into the video. I want to start off by talking about Dejounte Murray because he's a guy who's been linked to the Miami Heat multiple times in the past. And I think Heat fans are pretty intrigued about the idea of a hero in Dejounte Murray backcourt because he's a very well-rounded two-way player. Last season, he only played 31 games because of an Achilles injury, which we'll get into, but he still averaged 18 points per game, 7 assists, and 6.5 rebounds. On some not so great field goal percentage, he was at 39% from the field and 30% from three. But I do think last season was a bit of an outlier because it was his first year in New Orleans, new scheme, new system. He had the major injury. So I kind of want to look back at his previous season when he was still with Atlanta, in which his numbers were much better. 22 points per game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds on 46% from the field and 36% from three. I think these are very great numbers, especially relative to his contract, where next season he'll be making $31 million, followed by $33 million the year after that. And then his contract actually comes down a little bit, where the following season he has a player option for $31 million at the age of 31 years old. I could either see him accepting or declining that player option. It really just depends what his production is like at that time. But now let's go to the trade in which I cooked up to get Dejounte Murray to the Miami Heat. And all I have the Heat sending the Pelicans is the expiring contract of Terry Rozier and 1 first-round pick. This is quite a little bit of value relative to what we've seen Murray get traded for in the past. When the Hawks traded for him from the Spurs, they actually had to send 4 first-round picks. And then when the Pelicans traded for him from the Hawks, they only sent 2 first-round picks. And now I have the Heat sending 1. So every time he's been traded, I kind of have his trade value getting cut in half, but it's just unfortunate with the injury he had last year. And also the Pelicans weren't great, so they didn't get a huge chance to really showcase Dejounte Murray. So I'm not sure that he'd go for more than 1 first-round pick at this point of his career. So I don't think it's bad value for the Pelicans. Plus, on top of that, you're getting the huge cap flexibility and cap relief because all of that Dejounte Murray money for the next 3 years is coming off your books because Terry Rozier is expiring. So that really gives the Pelicans some flexibility to go with the core that they want to proceed with, whether that's with Zion, without Zion. You're going to have Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, a bunch of other young guys in the cap space to maybe build something around them, kind of like the Houston Rockets did. Maybe they give a Fred VanVleet type a bunch of money, help mentor the young guys, and then you build from there. They would have the flexibility to do that with this deal. Now, for the Miami Heat, we'll talk about the pros and cons of all these trades, but let's start with the pros for this one, in which the Heat get a massive upgrade over Terry Rozier. I mean, you're talking about a trade that just has 2 players involved, so I think you can compare, just the 2 point guards. Very clearly, Dejounte Murray is much better than Terry Rozier. I don't need to explain that to you. He is a much better fit on this team in terms of his facilitating and defense because, yes, Murray was always known as kind of a good point of attack defender. He could score the ball a little bit. Not a great shooter, but could get to the rim. But he's also an excellent playmaker. And I think that part of his game is highly underrated. And yes, I understand the Heat need some more scoring, but maybe more important than that, they need a guy who could be a true facilitator. Dejounte Murray is not Trae Young, but he's definitely a step above a lot of other point guards in the league in terms of his playmaking and would right away be the best, facilitator that the Heat have on their roster. The Heat would be able to field a lineup of Dejounte Murray, Tyler Hero, Andrew Wiggins, Bam Adebayo, and Khalil Ware, which I think is very, very solid. And then maybe the Heat use their other 2 tradable first-round picks that they would still have in the Andrew Wiggins contract. They'd still have the Duncan Robinson expiring deal. Maybe they can use those assets to get Kevin Durant. Now you go into next year, a weaker Eastern Conference with no Tatum. Maybe Giannis is out. And you got Murray, Hero, Durant, Bam, and Ware. Maybe I'm delusional. Call me Delulu. I think that team could go to the NBA Finals. Also, Dejounte Murray fits the timeline pretty well because next season he will only be 29 years old, and that just fits well with Hero, who's like, 26? Bam is 28. And if you do keep Wiggins, he's only 30. So I do think he kind of fits the timeline of what the Heat want to do. The cons, though, is the fact that he has a long-term contract. As much as it could benefit Miami if Dejounte Murray plays well, if he doesn't, and if he can't stay healthy, well, then it sucks that now you're in salary cap hell because you have all this money tied into a guy who's not contributing. I also want to note that maybe we shouldn't overhype his defense because he's not quite the defender that he once used to be. He was a guy that made an all-defense second team, but that was 7 years ago, back in 2018. So while I still think he's a very good defender, I don't think he's the all-world defender that he once was. And then, of course, the biggest con is the major question up in the air is how will he recover from his Achilles injury? He tore it back in January, and usually those are about a 12-month injury, which means he could come back in January the following season, which puts you, 3 months before the playoffs? That's kind of pushing it if you're looking to compete for next year. So that part does scare me a lot. But at the end of the day, if you're giving up an expiring Terry and 1 first-round pick, I definitely think that's a risk that I'd be willing to take if I was the Miami Heat. Next, I want to talk about CJ McCollum because he has always been able to get a bucket, and we know the Miami Heat can use as much buckets as possible. And last season, CJ averaged 21 points per game, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists on 44% shooting from the field and 37% shooting from 3. All of those numbers are pretty close to his career averages, so even at the age of 33 years old, he was still a relatively productive player. And looking at his contract situation, next year he is an expiring deal, only making $30 million at the age of 34 years old. Now, this trade that I cooked up to get him to the Miami Heat, I find quite interesting because in addition to him, the Heat are also receiving 2 first-round picks, including the 7th overall pick in this upcoming draft. And in return, the Heat are sending over Tyler Hero to the New Orleans Pelicans, which I think will be a great piece for their core. I don't think any of us expect the Pelicans to retain CJ McCollum. He's an expiring deal, so they'll likely try to move him this offseason or before the trade deadline. So if you're able to get a guy in Tyler Hero, who's a 25-year-old all-star who fits your other pieces flawlessly, I think that's great value. If the Pels decide that they do want to keep Zion, who's a non-shooter, or keep Trey Murphy, who's a very great versatile defender who can shoot, you add in Tyler Hero next to that, you kind of got the great guard, the great wing player, and the great guy in your power rotation. I just think those 3 guys could fit very well along with Herb Jones. They would have a nice young core that just meshes together. I think Tyler Hero is a very nice fit for them. I'm also not sure if the Pelicans would need to send us 2 first-round picks. I think Tyler Hero in general is worth 2 first-round picks. But if one of them is going to be the 7th overall pick in the draft, that has a lot of value in it of itself. But if the Heat are able to get 2 and one of them is 7th, I would take that a million times out of a million. The pros for the Miami Heat here is they basically get to rebuild without tanking because, yes, you're getting more assets for Tyler Hero, so maybe you can be in the game for a whale because now you have this additional draft capital. But you're also maybe staying relatively competitive next year because CJ is a similar type of player as Tyler Hero in terms of a very good shooter on and off the ball. But for me, my favorite part is that 7th overall pick because the guy that I would love to get in the draft is Jeremiah Fears. I think he would be awesome in this Heat system. When I watch him play, he reminds me of De'Aaron Fox, and I do think that he has the potential to be the 1A on a championship team one day, and doing this trade would allow the Miami Heat to get that. Next season, the Heat could put out a lineup of Jeremiah Fears, CJ McCollum, Andrew Wiggins, Bam Adebayo, and Khalil Ware. Yes, they probably would be mid again, but you'd have more picks. And if you kept Tyler Hero, you'd be mid. You trade Tyler Hero in this deal, you'd still be mid. But at least you got the additional draft assets and Jeremiah Fears, which I think is a dub for the Miami Heat, quite honestly. You also would maintain that cap flexibility because CJ is still an expiring deal. He's not a terrible contract because if he's not good here or you don't want to resign him, then you could just let him walk. Or maybe you could resign him on a cheaper team-friendly deal because you'd have his bird rights and he'd be 35 or 34, or 35 by the time he's ready to resign his new deal. I don't think he'd be asking for a ton of money at that age, so maybe you get him at a bit of a lower deal where he's still a productive player for that value. The only con is his age. He doesn't fit the timeline, but I mean, maybe he could be a nice bench piece in a couple of years, or maybe you just use him as salary filler in this trade and he's off the Heat the year after next. Point is, I want the picks for Tyler Hero. I think this is a trade that could get it done. The next guy I want to discuss is Trey Murphy III, who has probably been getting the most buzz in the media in terms of rumors over the last couple of days, at least amongst the Pelicans players, and that's because he's a very good young player. Last season, he was only 24 years old and averaged 21 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists on 45% shooting from the field and 36% shooting from 3. He does kind of get paid a lot of money for 4 more years. Next year, he's making $25 million, $27 the year after that, $29 the year after that, and then $31 million the year after that at the age of 28 years old. So he will still be relatively young. I'm kind of unsure what his trade value is because any team trading for him is more so giving up assets based off potential. But what I had the Miami Heat doing is receiving Trey Murphy in return for Terry Rozier's expiring deal and 2 first-round picks. So basically the same deal as Dejounte Murray, except sending an additional first-round pick. For the Pelicans, I think this is a win for them because they get some pretty heavy draft capital, maybe too much. I don't really know what Trey Murphy's value is at this point. He really only took off last season. But the Pelicans would also be getting that cap flexibility because Rozier isn't expiring compared to Trey, who we just said had 4 more years. So if they decide they want to move on, get that money back, this trade would allow them to do it. And as far as the Miami Heat, he fits our timeline perfectly. And his on-court fit is pretty clear too. He's a very good shooter, versatile defender, and we know that Spoelstra likes to switch everything, and that's something that Trey Murphy can do. I mean, we just talked about trading Tyler Hero to the Pelicans to play with Trey Murphy, and we said that would fit great. Well, the same thing can happen here. The Heat can field a starting lineup next year of Tyler Hero, Andrew Wiggins, Trey Murphy, Bam Adebayo, and Khalil Ware. While I certainly don't think that's a championship contender, and I'm not sure if any of those guys can be the 1A on a contender, it is no doubt a very nice young core. And if Murphy continues to progress the way that he has been these last couple of seasons, then that contract is not bad at all. Because that salary cap is going to spike in a couple of years. And if you're getting a guy who can average well over 20 points per game while playing great defense and shooting the ball efficiently, then around 30, $29-30 million, it's not that much. The only downsides, though, I would say is we don't know if Trey Murphy can do that. It's kind of a small sample size because he really only took off just last season when a lot of other guys started getting hurt and he got a lot more playing time. That's when we saw his numbers go up. And he only played 53 games last year. That's because he tore his labrum in his rotator cuff. So he does have some of those injury concerns as well. Doing this trade would be the Heat really banking on him being a better player. The part that scares me is that maybe he's another good team, bad stats guy. I don't think so because he's also a very versatile defender and efficient player, but I will always get a little bit of PTSD after Terry Rozier. seeing that guy score 24 points per game on a really bad team and then come here and stink it up, it's just something that makes me a little weary. But I don't really believe that would be the case with Trey Murphy. I do wonder, though, if that's too much draft capital for a non-needle mover, because if the Heat only have 3 first-round picks and you trade 2 of them for a guy who's not the 1A on a championship team, it's like, what are we doing here? How do we really get ourselves out of purgatory? I don't think this trade does it, but they would have a nice young core, so I suppose I'm slightly interested. Next, let's talk about Herb Jones, because he is the most Heat culture guy that we've talked about so far. The numbers won't jump out at you. Only played 20 games last year, averaged 10 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists on 44% from the field, and 31% from 3, but that's not what he does. He doesn't score. He is a defensive specialist. Now, the contract might be a little too much for a guy who's so one-dimensional. Next season, he's making $14 million and about $15 million the year after that at the age of 28 years old. But it's not terrible. If he can develop that jumper a little bit, we saw him just the year prior shoot 42% from 3 on 3.5 attempts. If he can get back to that, you're talking about a guy now that can stretch the floor while playing all NBA defense. Then I don't think $15 million for a versatile defender of his level is crazy. And the trade that I cooked up was the Miami Heat receiving Herb Jones in exchange for the expiring contract of Duncan Robinson and 1 first-round pick. So basically the same trade that we did for Dejounte Murray, except we're using Duncan instead of Terry because Herb makes a little bit less money than Dejounte Murray. But still, from the Pelican side of things, they're getting that cap flexibility because Duncan Robinson is expiring, and they're getting a first-round pick, which for Herb Jones, I think is good value. Maybe the Pelicans would be more okay trading Herb Jones than some of the other guys because he's not old, but he is a bit older. He's already 27 years old, and that's because he came into the league as a 23-year-old rookie. So he could fit the timeline with Zion and Trey Murphy. He's only a couple of years older, but I wouldn't say it's perfect. And for the Miami Heat, the pros are you're getting a guy who can play defense. Just like Trey Murphy, he's a switchable defender. He's very versatile, but just to another level. Herb Jones is a guy that has made All-NBA teams. He is like that. Like when you talk about the premier defenders in the league, that's what you're getting with Herb Jones. Also, his contract's not insane. If any of these players making $15 million or less, it's not wild. It still is a movable contract, which is good too. But I'm not going to say I love it if he is just a one-dimensional player like we mentioned earlier. He does fit our timeline pretty well, though, because he's basically the same age as Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. So I do think that part works out pretty well. The cons, though, would be we're trading a first-round pick for a guy who probably wouldn't start for us as is, because I don't think he's playing behind Andrew Wiggins or Bam Adebayo or Khalil Ware. I'm not sure that he could ever play next to Bam Adebayo and Khalil Ware because of the spacing concerns. Can he shoot? Can he not? I don't know. Last year, he couldn't shoot, but the year before, he was pretty good. I don't know. I do feel like if the Heat were able to get him in their system, maybe they could develop him a little bit because they've always done a good job developing shooters, but usually they get guys in when they're a little bit younger. Herb Jones is already 27, so it might be a little bit harder. I don't hate this trade, but I don't think I love it either. And then the last trade I have is the Miami Heat receiving Kelly Olynyk from the New Orleans Pelicans in exchange for a half-eaten can of Pringles, which could be swapped out for a bag of Takis if that's your thing. And to this trade, I say, hell no. Listen, I may be in the minority here. I know a lot of Heat fans like Kelly Olynyk, but I'll admit, I do not. Listen, he seemed like such a nice guy when he was here. I liked all the things he was doing in the community, and the Kelly Keeper was fun, right? Y'all remember that? I always had a good time watching that, and he gave you the occasional flashy behind-the-back dribble step-back three. That was cool. He was a fine shooter here, but defensively, my God, was I tired of watching his slow-ass feet. This man had bricks for feet. I mean, I think I'm slow. Anytime I feel bad about how slow I am, I go watch Kelly Olynyk highlights. That's what I do. I remember back in the 2020 finals, Markieff Morris got open three after open three after open three because Kelly Olynyk was way too slow to run out to the corners and contest them. And then they couldn't take him out because his replacement back then in 2020 was Myers Leonard, who was even slower. So No, I'm good on old, slow, white guys. Unless it's Luka Doncic, I'll take him. Or Nikola Jokic, I suppose, too. But anyways, obviously, this trade is just a joke. But let me know down in the comments below if y'all would be interested in Kelly Olynyk, because I am curious. But that's really all I got to say for this video. So let me know down in the comments below which one of these trades or prospects do you like the most, because I'm very curious to hear what y'all think. Make sure to like the video and subscribe, because all your support is greatly appreciated. I'm on the grind to hit 8,000 subs, and I can't do that without your help. That being said, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need that head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.